بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. The first hadith which we are going to look at is a hadith which Imam Muslim rahimahullah has narrated in his Sahih. And this hadith has been narrated by Sayyiduna Jabir radiallahu anhu that Salama radiallahu anha, who was the wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, استأذنت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم في الحجامة. She once took permission from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam fil hajama, whether she can do cupping or not. فَأَمَرَ أَبَا طَيْبَةَ أَن يَحْجُمَهَا. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam then ordered Abu Tayba to do the cupping for her. And then the hadith goes on to say, قَالَ حَسِبْتُ أَنَّهُ كَانَ أَخَاهَا مِنَ الرَّضَاعَةِ أَوْ غُلَامًا لَمْ يَحْتَلِمْ. Now a couple of points regarding this particular hadith. The first point is this issue regarding hajamat and cupping. Now cupping or hajamat is like a medication, is like a ilaj, is like tadawi. And the wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Salama, she sought permission from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that whether I can do this cupping or this hajamat or not. And cupping in a nutshell is basically, in our body, we have bad blood. And it is because of this bad blood, it causes us illnesses, it causes us diseases, it causes us sickness, diseases, bacteria, germs kind of spread in our body, and it makes our body weak, it makes everything in our body cells and so on, weak. So that's what is called hajam, like the bad blood. Now what happens is that to get rid of this bad blood, you have hajams or cuppers, and what they do is that they use a kind of needle to derive and take this bad blood out. So that particular form of medication is called hajam. Now the wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Salama, she's asking Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that, can I do this particular medication? Now the next part of the hadith goes on to say that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then told Abu Tayba to do this medication and to do this cupping and ilaj on her behalf. Now this takes me on to the next point here, and that is that there are two places in the body where cupping is mainly done from. The first place is from the head, so they put a needle through the head and then take out the bad blood from one's brain and head and skull area. And the second place where they take this bad blood out from is from the hips. Now this leads to a question here, and the question is that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam allowing his wife Salama to expose her satar, her aura, i.e. the two places which a woman has to cover, i.e. her head and her hips. What Salama radiallahu anha doing for this particular medication is she's exposing these two parts in front of Abu Tayba, who from the hadith it seems as though that he's a strange man, a non-mahram. So how can Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam allow Salama radiallahu anha to expose her hair, to expose her hips in front of Abu Tayba radiallahu anha? So therefore the next part of the hadith, Sayyiduna Jabir radiallahu anhu, it's his word, he goes on to say that أَنَّهُ كَانَ أَخَاهَا مِنَ الرَّضَاعَةِ, that Abu Tayba was Salama radiallahu anha's foster brother, which then indicates that Abu Tayba was actually the mahram of Salama radiallahu anha, and obviously in front of your mahram and so on, as I've explained in last week's lesson, that there are certain parts of your body which you can expose, and obviously your head is one, and obviously the hips well, not exactly the hip area, but definitely you can expose the hair and the head in front of your mahram. So Sayyidina Jabir anhu is saying that Abu Tayba was Salama anha's stepbrother or foster brother, or he says, أو غلاما لم يحتلم, that Abu Tayba was a boy who had not reached the age of puberty, which then indicates that Abu Tayba, he was very young and he did not have this kind of inclination and this kind of lust or desires for women. So therefore Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam allowed Salama anha to expose those parts of her body in front of Abu Tayba. Now the hadith which we've kind of understood to a certain point. Now from this particular hadith we need to derive certain rulings. And the ruling which we can derive from this particular hadith is whether it is permissible for Muslim women to expose their body in front of male doctors, in front of male practitioners, or in front of a male when it comes for medication and when it comes for ailment and so on. Can a woman expose that part of her body to a male doctor? So as you can see in this particular hadith, Hajamat is also a form of medication, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam allowing Salama to expose that part of her body to a man, i.e. in the form of Abu Tayba. Now there's a couple of ways to look at this particular ruling and mas'ala. The first way to look at it is that, first and foremost, a Muslim woman should always look for a female practitioner, a female doctor when it comes for her medication. And in particular, if it's something, a wound or an injury, which entails her to expose some part of her body, then obviously it's always preferable and best that she sees a doctor who's a female nurse, a female practitioner, then that is more better and that is more preferable. Similarly, at the same time, if a Muslim woman wants to get some consultation, so she's not going to be exposing any part of her body, but she's just going to get some advice. Or she wants to, say for example, seek advice regarding a part of the body that is not part of her aura, which basically means that, just say for example, she's got some kind of scar on her face or on her palms, or on her feet, and as I explained in last week's lesson, the face, the palm and the feet, they're not considered to be part of the aura, part of that area which she has to cover. So if the injury or if the concern or consultation is just about general, without her exposing any part of her body, or if the injury is such that, or the wound is on one of those three parts of the body where she is allowed to expose, then in that situation it is permissible for her to seek treatment from a male doctor, although it is preferable that she seeks treatment from a female practitioner and a female doctor. So as you can see from the second situation, she's not actually exposing any of her private parts or any of her parts which she has to cover. She's just going to a doctor, a male doctor, just to get some advice that, look, I'm suffering from diabetes, what do I need to do? I've got this particular thing, what do I need to do? Just generally asking for advice. So in that situation, she can ask advice from a male doctor, from a male practitioner, or if the injury or the wound or the illness has got to do with those parts of the body which is not part of the aura, i.e. her face, her palms and her feet, then in that situation, again, although preferable that she seeks advice from a female doctor, however, if she was to ask a male doctor, then that would be permissible. And a third scenario here, and that is that obviously there are certain situations where basically it's a life and death matter, or something like an operation, where it's not possible or it may not be feasible to find or to look for a female doctor or a female practitioner. Then in that situation, if the Muslim woman was to take advice or was to get treated by a male doctor, then that would be permissible and that would be allowed. So just say for example, if it's like say an operation, a heart transplant, say for example, or liver transplant or kidney transplant, something which is very, very serious, and the best doctor who is available at that particular hospital happens to be a male. So in that situation, because it's like a life and death matter, or because that particular male doctor may be the specialist and may be the expert in that field, then in that situation, if the Muslim woman was to get treatment from the male doctor, then that would be allowed. So basically, this particular ruling in a nutshell is that when it comes for normal, everyday kind of, medication and consultation, it is preferable that she seeks advice from a female practitioner, from a female doctor, especially if she's going to be treated as well, and the doctor needs to look at some of the parts from her aura and from those parts which she has to cover. Then again, it is preferable that she gets advice and she gets it seen by a female doctor or a female practitioner. However, if that is not possible, and especially if it's, say, operation or something which is a life and death matter, then in that situation, if she was to get advice or was to be treated by a male doctor, then that would be allowed and that would be permissible. So that is the first hadith. The second hadith which we are going to look at, again, is a hadith which can be found in Sahih Muslim, this time narrated by Jarir bin Abdullah. And he says, سَأَلْتُ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ أَنْ نَظْرِ الْفُجَاءَةِ, that I asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam regarding an nazl fuja'a, which means the unintentional glance, i.e. the unintentional glance at a strange woman. What should I do in that situation? So the hadith goes on to say, فَأَمَرَنِي أَنْ أَصْرِفَ بَصَرِي, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told me or ordered me to take my gaze or my glance away straight away. Now the meaning of this particular hadith is telling us that it is impermissible to look at an unlawful or a strange woman. Any woman who is not lawful for us in terms of they are not from our marriageable, i.e. basically those who are not our mahram, so obviously if it is our mother, sister and so on, then obviously we could look at them. But those who are not from our kin, next of kin, like our mother, sister and so on, those who we are allowed to marry, then it is unlawful for us to look at them, and it is unlawful for us to glance our gaze at them. It is considered something unlawful and something which is haram. And that's why it's mentioned in the Holy Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَكُلِّ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ, that say to the believing men that they should keep their glance and their gazes down. Now what this particular hadith is telling us is that Jarir bin Abdullah is saying that just say for example accidentally or unintentionally we looked at a particular woman. Just say for example we may have been driving and on the street we just like saw a particular woman. Or just say for example we're walking and then our glance just fell on the other side of the road and we saw a particular woman. Or just say for example in a shop or something like that, our glance fell on a particular woman. So Jarir bin Abdullah is asking that what should we do thereafter? So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then said, "An asrifa basari," which means that take your glance or your look or your gaze away from her. So if you did, for example, see her accidentally or unintentionally your glance fell on her, then straight away take your gaze, take your glance away from her. Otherwise, as we can look at in another hadith on the next page, if you were to continue looking at her, then that would be considered impermissible and that would be considered unlawful and haram. Now, regarding this particular hadith, some of you may be thinking that this particular hadith or acting upon this particular hadith is something which is not practical in this day and age. In particular, those who are, say, for example, studying at universities or college, they'll say that, oh, we have to speak to our female teachers, we have to speak to our female lecturers. When we go to, say, for example, in the bank to, put some money inside, there's always female cashiers there. When we go to the shops, when we go to Asda, when we go to Tesco's, there's always females there working. So how can we live our life without looking at female? Because the hadith quite clearly says here that you only have to look at them once. So if you were to act upon this hadith strictly to the words, then that will mean that it's going to be difficult for us to live our life and so on. Now the scholars have commented on this particular hadith, and they have said that this particular hadith is not impractical to act upon in this day and age. I.e., it is possible to act upon this particular hadith. You could still live your normal life, you could still go according to what you need to do without gazing or staring at a particular woman. Now somebody may say, well, just say if I need to speak to someone, say at college or at work or a female colleague, then how do I go about it? Now the ulama, the scholars have said that in such a situation what you should do is that you can, say for example, when you start talking to them, you can, say for example, look at them, just like glance for a second and then put your glance down. And then you could continue talking to them without looking directly at their eyes or without looking directly at their face. And it is possible when you, like, say for example, speak to female colleagues or female lecturers and so on, it is possible for you to communicate with them, talk to them and speak to them without actually directly looking at their eyes. It's not necessary that when you speak to someone, you have to look at their eyes. Even like when we speak to our elders or when we speak to men, we don't actually stare at their eyes and start looking at them and speak to them in that way. We don't actually, we look at part of their face and then we probably put a bit of their gaze down, and then whenever we need to see something, then we put our gaze up and then we put it down again. So exactly in the same way, it is permissible and it is possible for you to communicate and to speak to a particular woman, say a lecturer or someone at the shop. Obviously, the conversation should be kept to a minimum. Okay? It doesn't, this hadith is not, or what I'm explaining to you, doesn't mean that yes, we could now go and speak to any woman as long as we keep our gaze down. No. It's only like where there's a need or a necessity, like as I said, in a shop or at work or so on. So the conversation should be kept to a minimum. However, if you are going to speak to her, then as long as you follow the procedure which I mentioned in terms of, speaking to them, just here and there, just, casting your gaze, that would be permissible, but you shouldn't really stare at them and look at them directly when you are speaking to them. As long as that is maintained, then it will be permissible for you to speak to them and communicate to them in that particular way. The next two hadiths which I'm going to look at is the topic which we've already discussed in last week's lesson with regards to looking at looking at a woman who you intend to marry. The first hadith is from Sunan Abu Dawud, narrated by Sayyidina Jabir ibn Anhu, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said, إِذَا خَطَبَ أَحَدُكُمْ الْمَرْأَةَ, that when one of you proposes to a woman, فَإِنِ اسْتَطَاعَ أَن يَنْظُرَ إِلَى مَا يَدْعُوهُ إِلَى نِكَاحِهَا, which means that if you are able or capable to look at that portion of the body which will induce you to marry her, then فَلْيَفْعَلْ, then you should marry her, or you should do that. So again, we looked at this hadith last week as well, that when it comes to, say for example, Islam doesn't say that you just, without looking at the girl who you intend to marry, without looking at her, you just get married to her and then that's it, and then expect that particular marriage to work and expect them to have a happy and a loving life. That's not necessarily what Islam teaches and preaches. Islam actually says that it is considered desirable and mustahab that before you get married to that particular girl, it is permissible for you to look at her. And this is the hadith which again indicates that if you are able to look at that which induces you to get married to her. And we mentioned in last week's lesson that the two parts of the body which you are allowed to look at is her face and is her palms. You're not allowed to look at any other parts besides those two, because from the face you can derive her beauty, and from her palm you can derive whether she's thin, whether she's tall, whether she's fat, whether she's big, and so on and so forth. So these are the only two places which you are allowed to look at. And the next hadith thereafter also explains another virtue of looking at the girl before you get married. This hadith is narrated by Mughira bin Shu'bah, that he once said to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Khatabtu imra'atan," which means that I have made a proposal to a woman. فَقَالَ لِي رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then said to me, "Hal nazarta ilayha," that have you seen her? قلت Mughira bin Shu'bah رضي الله عنه replied by saying, La, I haven't seen her. قال Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam then said, فانظر إليها فإنه أحرى أن يقدم بينكما. Which means that go and see this particular girl. Why? Because by seeing her, it will inshallah create love and unity and togetherness. So that's one of the reasons why, another wisdom of looking at a particular girl is because if you do see her from before, then obviously if you don't like her, then you could obviously then cancel it and say, well, you could say to your parents that, look, I don't really like this particular girl, I don't want to go ahead with the marriage. Because what could happen is that if you didn't see her properly, and then you got married to her, and then when you then see her on the first night, then what could happen is that what you thought or what you imagined your wife to be, she's not that. And then that kind of leads to bickering, that kind of leads to problem, that kind of leads to disunity in the marriage. So that's why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that if it's possible for the boy to look at the girl, then he should do it. Why? Because it creates love and unity between the boy and the girl. The next hadith which we are going to look at is a hadith which can be found in Sunan Tirmidhi, Sunan Abu Dawood and Sunan Darmi. Now this hadith, the meaning of this hadith has already come before, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam once said to Sayyiduna Ali radhiyallahu anhu that, Ya Ali, O Ali, La tutbi'in nazarata an nazarata, which means that do not follow one glance or one gaze with another glance or with another gaze. Meaning that if you looked at a particular woman or an unlawful woman unintentionally, then don't look at her again. Why? فَإِنَّ لَكَ الْأُولَى, which means that the first time you looked at her, that would be considered lawful and halal. However, وَلَيْسَتْ لَكَ الْآخِرَةِ, however, it is not permissible for you to look at her the second time. The second glance which you then give at her, then that would be considered impermissible and that would be considered haram. As I was explaining before in the hadith, that if you just looked at her unintentionally or your glance fell on her, then fair enough, that is not considered haram. That is not considered impermissible. You will not be considered sinful for that. However, if you then follow it up with another glance, then that second glance which you do, then that is considered sinful, that is considered gunagar, and for that you will be punished, as the hadith says that فَإِنَّ لَكَ الْأُولَى, meaning that the first one was fair enough, you did it by mistake, unintentionally, you didn't mean it, hence that would be considered lawful. However, the second glance which you then do afterwards, then that would not be considered lawful, that would not be considered permissible. Now the next hadith which we are going to look at, the next 2-3 hadiths is actually very similar. The first hadith of this particular batch of ahadith, narrated by Jarhad bin Khuwaylid. Now Jarhad bin Khuwaylid, he was one of the Ashab al-Suffar, and this hadith can be found in Sunan Tirmidhi and Sunan Abu Dawood, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to him that Ama alimta, don't you know? Ama alimta means that do you not know? Anna al-fakhiza awratun, which means that your kneecaps, awratun, are part of the body which you have to conceal and which you can't leave exposed. So anna al-fakhiza awratun, the word awra means that part of the body which you have to cover. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying to Jarhad bin Khuwaylid that the kneecaps, they are considered to be part of the awra. It's something which you have to leave covered and you can't expose it. Now what we can gather from this particular hadith, and this is the opinion of Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullah alayh, that the awra or the satar for a man is from his belly button up to and including his knees. So when we mean belly button, so the belly button, i.e. the belly button here, that is not included. So it's just below that, all the way up to and including the knees. And when we say that this is the satar or this is the aura for men, it means that that particular part of the body always has to be covered. Even to the extent it comes up later that even if you are by yourself at home, even though like there's no one there, your family, no one's there, and you want to, like, say for example, walk naked, that is not even allowed. Okay, that particular part of the body always has to be covered. Now, this particular hadith is actually evidence against Imam Malik rahmatullah alayh, because Imam Malik rahmatullah alayh is of the view that the knees, they are not considered part of the aura, or you can leave that exposed. However, Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullah is of the view that no, the knees, they are part of the aura. This is our evidence, this is our hadith to prove that this is part of the aura, and this has to be left covered all the time. Now this takes me on to a ruling or a masla here, which unfortunately is quite common with the youngsters and the youth nowadays, and that is with regards to when they are playing football or when they are playing sports and the shorts they are wearing. Now, as I said, this particular knee, the kneecaps, that is part of the aura. It has to be covered all the time. Even if you are by yourself, even if you are in front of people, you have to have the kneecaps covered. So therefore, what we can derive is that to play football in shorts where the kneecaps are not being covered, then that would not be allowed and that would not be permissible. Even say, for example, going swimming, and if you're just having the trunks on, again, that is not allowed. Why? Because the trunks just cover the private parts, and then you've got your knees and your thighs, everything is being uncovered, everything is being exposed. On top of that, the area below your belly button, that is also being exposed as well. So going swimming, say for example, with trunks, or even playing sports or activities outside by just wearing normal shorts, then that would not be allowed and that would not be permissible. Now the way to get around it is that either if you want to, like for example, wear shorts and so on, either you need to be wearing that kind of shorts where the belly button area is being covered and also your knees are being covered as well. And you probably see that, especially those who are boxers and so on, you get these boxer shorts. So these boxer trunks, what they wear is very, very long. It covers all their knees and so on. So if you want to play sports with shorts and so on, so that will be the best item or the best clothing to use when it comes. Obviously, you could always use tracksuit and other kind of things. But what I'm trying to say is that to wear shorts for sporting activities, whether it's inside a building like indoors or whether it's outdoors, then that would not be permissible. And similarly, going swimming and just wearing trunks and shorts which just covers your private parts, then that would not be allowed and that would not be permissible. Quite clearly mentioning the hadith here that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying to Jarhad bin Khuwaylid that أَنَّ الْفَقِدَ أَوْرَةٌ, that your kneecaps are the aura and you have to cover that and you can't leave that exposed. And even to the next hadith when we look at, which can be found in Sunan Abu Dawud, Sunan Ibn Majah, again this is narrated by Sayyidina Ali radhiyallahu anhu, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Ya Ali, O Ali, La tubriz faqizaka wa la tanzur ila faqizi hayyin wa la mayyitin. Which means that you cannot expose your knees, and then he goes on to say, Wala tanzur ila fakhizi hayyin wala mayyitin. And also at the same time, it's not permissible for you to see the knees or the thighs of a live person or of a dead person. Wala mayyitin. Now what we can gather from this particular hadith is that you're not allowed to see the satar or the aura of another person who is alive and also of a dead person. Obviously the first part of the hadith tells us that that particular area is the aura and we have to cover it. But the second part of the hadith is telling us is that the same way that particular part is aura and we have to leave it covered, similarly we as Muslim, whether of another Muslim man, of another non-Muslim man, we're not allowed to look at that particular part of their body. Even he may be alive or whether he is dead. Whether he's a mayyit, whether he's passed away, even then the aura and the satar, we're not allowed to look at that. And this takes me on to the masla regarding when it comes to doing ghusl of the deceased. So again, when you do ghusl of the deceased, when you are bathing the deceased, you have to make sure that the deceased, that particular area, not just his private part, but that area from his belly button up to and including his knees, that has to be covered. You have a kind of sheet or a towel over that particular area, and you make sure that that particular area is covered when you are bathing him and when you are giving him a ghusl. The reason why I'm saying this is that there have been occasions where sometimes people, they've been bathing the deceased, but what they've done is that they just covered the private part area. And his thighs, they left his exposed, they left his kneecaps exposed, they left his belly button and that particular area exposed, and they've been giving the bath in that particular way. So that is totally against the Sharia. Obviously, when you are bathing the deceased, you want to do it properly. Well, when you look at it, everything in life, we should do it according to the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And in particular, when you are bathing the deceased, which is basically one of the last things you'll be doing to the deceased before he leaves this particular dunya and this particular world. So therefore, at least try to do that correctly and according to the Sunnah. So therefore, when you are bathing the deceased, you have to make sure that his aura and the part which he has to cover has to be covered. And just because he's not alive, you can't say, oh well, he's dead, it doesn't matter and so on. No, even then that particular area has to be left covered and it cannot be left exposed. The next hadith which we are going to look at is a hadith which can be found in Sunan al-Tirmidhi, narrated by Ibn Umar al-Anhu, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Iyyakum wat-ta'arri," which means say or abstain from exposing your satar or exposing your aura. فَإِنَّ مَعَكُمْ مَنْ لَا يُفَارِقُكُمْ, because with you, you have angels who never depart illa in the ghaib, except when you go to the toilet, وَهِينَ يُفْضِي الرَّجُلْ إِلَىٰ أَهْلِهِ, or except when you have intimate relationship with your wife, فَاسْتَحْيُوهُمْ, so therefore show some modesty to them, وَأَكْرِمُوهُمْ, and also respect them. And in this hadith here, as I was explaining before, tells us that the covering of our aura, which is from our belly button up to and including our knees, it applies in all situations, even though we may be alone by ourselves at home. Some people, it happens that they think, okay, in front of other people, I'll cover that particular part. However, at home, it doesn't matter. I'll just walk around with shorts or just in my underwear. I'll go from upstairs, downstairs. It doesn't matter. That will be permissible. That will be lawful. No, the hadith quite clearly says that you should abstain from exposing your aura and your satar. Even though there's no one there, even then, there's a hadith which comes up later, you should still abstain from doing that. Now, the hadith here tells us that we have two angels who are always with us. They are the Kiram Katibin, so they are always with us, they always write good deeds, bad deeds. And we also have another angel called the Hafaza Malaika, are those angels who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to us to protect us. Hafaza, from the word hifazat, protection and so on. So these two angels are always with us. Now the hadith says that because these two angels are always with you, so therefore if you are going to expose your private parts and your aura, then these two angels here who are always with you, they feel embarrassed, they feel a bit ashamed. It's like, say for example, if another Muslim brother or another human, if he was to expose his private parts in front of everyone, you yourself, you feel a bit ashamed, you feel a bit like, immodest, you feel a bit, there's a bit of haya that you think, oh, what's he doing and so on. So exactly here as well, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is trying to explain that, look, when you expose your private parts, even though there's no one there in that particular room, but beware or always keep in mind that the Kiram Katibin, the angels who always look after you and protect you, they are there and they feel embarrassed what you are doing. And the hadith goes on to say that these angels only in two places where they are not with you. And they are in the ghaib, when you go to the toilet. So when you go to the toilet and you are about to urinate and so on and so forth, then only then that's when the angels go away and disappear. And the second time is that when you are having intimate relationship with your wife, in those situations, that's when the angels disappear and they're not there. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam goes on to say that فَاسْتَحْيُوهُمْ, which means that show some modesty, وَأَكْرِمُوهُمْ, and respect them, even though there's no one else there, but at least, the very least, show some modesty and haya and respect to the angels and have those parts covered when you are there. Now the last hadith which we are going to look at for today's lesson is a hadith again which can be found in Sunan Tirmidhi and Sunan Abu Dawud.
Sheikh, if I ask you a question, over when you are in the shower.
I'll answer you after inshallah. Now this hadith of Sunan Abu Dawud and Sunan Tirmidhi, narrated by Salama radhiyallahu anha, very famous hadith. She narrates that أنها كانت عند رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وميمونة, which means that I was with Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم and also Hazrat Maymuna radhiyallahu anha, again another wife of Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم. We were with him when is أقبل ابن Maktum, when the blind companion Abdullah bin Maktum radhiyallahu anhu came. فدخل عليه, he entered. فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم said to us, احتجبا منه, that do parda from him, do hijab from him, I seclude yourselves from him. فقلت, Salama then said, Ya Rasulullah, alaysa huwa a'ma, isn't he not blind? La yubsiruna, he cannot see us. So the wives of Prophet ﷺ, they were thinking that all these rulings about parda and hijab, it applies from a man's point of view, that a man is not allowed to look at a woman. So they said to Rasulullah ﷺ that, look, Abdullah bin Maktum is blind, he can't see us, so therefore there's no danger of temptation, there's no danger of fitna, so let us remain here, he can't see us. Alaysa huwa a'ma la yubsiruna. So Rasulullah ﷺ then said, Afa amyawani, are you too blind? Antuma lastuma tubsiranihi, can't you not see him? Can't you not see him? Now what we can gather from this particular hadith is the ruling whether women, can they look at men or not. Because all the hadith which I've been looking at the past pages, so it's always been like, men, you can't look at women. And we mentioned that the first glance is, if it was done unintentionally, that would be permissible. However, the second glance, then that would not be allowed, that would not be permissible. So the hadiths which we have looked at thus far has always been, okay, men, you can't look at women. Now the table is turned here, and the question which we need to ask is that, okay, can women look at men? Now the ruling in the Hanafi fiqh is that it is permissible for women to look at men as long as there is no danger of shahwa or desire, there is no danger of fear or temptation on behalf of the woman. So basically, if a woman is confident, if she thinks that, look, there's no danger of fear or temptation and shahwa, then it is permissible for them to look at strange men. And the evidence for that is the hadith from Sahih al-Bukhari of Sayyidah Aisha anha, very famous hadith, where she was with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and she was seeing those Ethiopian boys, very famous hadith, who were playing with their bow and arrow. So Sayyidah Aisha anha was looking at those boys. It's a very famous hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari. And it's mentioned in the commentary of that particular hadith that this incident of the Ethiopian boys playing with their bow and arrow happened in 9th Hijri, basically 2 years before Rasulullah passed away, when Sayyidah Aisha anha was at the age of 16. So from there the scholars have said that this is one of the very last incidents, so that has preference of what is actually considered to be the legal ruling in the Sharia. So therefore the Hanafi scholars have said that as long as there is no kind of danger of temptation and fitna and so on, then in principle it is permissible to look at for a woman to look at a strange man. However, where there is a danger of fitna and temptation, then this particular hadith here of Salama and Maymuna radiallahu anha applies. Because as you can see quite clearly that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying to Abdullah bin Maktum radiallahu anhu, ihtajiba min, to the wife, that ihtajiba minhu, that don't look at him but instead seclude yourselves from him, do parda from him. And then when they then asked, well, he's blind, he can't see us, then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that, are you too blind, can you not see him? And to tell the truth that, especially in this day and age, when fitna is at its peak and it's at a high and fitna and mischief will always increase until the day of judgment, it's preferable and it's best that this particular hadith is acted upon and that women don't look at strange men. That women don't look at ghaib mahram men. The same way men should not look at unlawful women. Why? Because of the danger of fitna and temptation. Similarly, vice versa, women should not look at men. And to tell you, there has been certain occasions where, or incidents, in particular where you have these kind of mixed Islamic gatherings. What I mean by mixed Islamic gatherings, where there may be fair enough a partition in the middle, but there's a beam of the scholar, or there's like a picture of the scholar, or a kind of video recording of the scholar, which is then portrayed into the women's section. And there has been some incidents where certain sisters, unfortunately, then they started developing crush for the scholar. They started having all these desires for the scholar, and it kind of led to a lot of problems and fitna and so on. So even in this day and age, where for example, we see all these kind of Islamic events going on, but sometimes when the scholar's picture or the scholar's kind of video is taken and is kind of portrayed live to the sister's side, and if women are watching this, then it kind of leads towards fitna and mischief. So therefore, it is preferable that even women, sisters, Muslim sisters, they also refrain from looking at unlawful men. Why? Because as we're going to look at later, shaitan is very, very clever. He's very, very deceptive. Sometimes it could be unintentionally, you're just looking at a particular man, but then slowly, shaitan over time, he may kind of develop unlawful thoughts and evil thoughts in your heart regarding for that particular man. So therefore, it's always advised and preferable that even though the ruling is one, which says that women can look at men as long as they are sure that there's no fitna and temptation, but obviously then there's another thing which is taqwa and piety. And taqwa and piety says that, look, in this day and age, where there's so much fitna and mischief, it's preferable that women also keep their gaze and their glance down when it comes to unlawful men. And it's also mentioned in the Quran as well, وَكُلِّ الْمُؤْمِنَاتِ يَغْضُضْنَ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِنَّ. Allah says in Surah An-Nur that, O Prophet, say to the believing women, يَغْضُضْنَ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِنَّ, they should cast and keep their gaze down in front of unlawful men. May Allah give the tawfiq to act on what's been said. Wa aflu da'wan alhamdulillah. वो शावर के बारे में एक तो